All right, we are glad to have you here. Welcome, Joseph. From that particular platform, I can actually see that you are a man who can be able to go and beat a strategy 2 years ahead of the target that is there. So we are glad to have you here. You're well?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm well. Thank you.
Fantastic.
How are you?
So I'm good. I'm great. So we're looking forward for this insightful discussion. Looking forward to hear from you. So we shall lend you our ears, and we're looking forward to the discussion. So welcome once again, Joseph. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Let me start by thanking CIO Africa for organizing this very important summit and for inviting me and the Mastercard Foundation to be part of it. So for those who are not familiar with the Mastercard Foundation, let me just do a quick introduction to the organization. It was created in 2006 by Mastercard International and operates independently under the governance of its own board of directors. Since its creation, it actually has grown from a rather small startup to one of the largest foundations in the world. To date, with a commitment of over $4 billion, the foundation have partnered with visionary organizations on the continent to increase financial inclusion and access to education for young Africans. Together with its partner, the foundation has improved the lives of 51 million people and their families. In 2016, the foundation launched its Young Africa Works strategy, which aims to enable 30 million young Africans, especially young women, to secure, dignified, and fulfilling work by the year 2030. As a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the foundation launched in 2020 the COVID-19 Recovering the Resilience Program to assist institutions and communities in Africa and within indigenous communities in Canada to withstand and respond to short-term impacts of the pandemic while strengthening their resilience in the long run. In 2021, the foundation launched the Saving Lives and Livelihood Program, a $1.3 billion partnership with Africa CDC to acquire vaccines for at least 50 million people, supporting the delivery of vaccination to millions more across the continent, and lay the groundwork for vaccine manufacturing in Africa through the focus on human capital development and strengthening Africa CDC. The foundation believes that everyone, every single person deserves the opportunity to learn and grow. That's why we're here today, to be part of this rather crucial conversation. The timing of this conversation couldn't have been any better. In the last 2 years, while the world battled the pandemic, the importance of the digital agenda was really, really highlighted. At times, the physical world came to a standstill, with lockdowns, school closures, travel and movement restrictions to slow down the spread of the pandemic. Those who were unprepared to navigate the virtual or digital world paid a heavy price indeed. While all sectors have been deeply impacted, the impact on the education sector will reverberate for years to come. According to UNICEF, more than 168 million children worldwide were out of school for almost an entire year. More than an additional 216 million children missed more than 3/4 of the year for their in-person learning. This comes on top of an already existing education crisis, especially here in sub-Saharan Africa, where 30% of the 6 to 11-year-old and 60% of the 15 to 17-year-old were already out of school. The point I'm attempting to make here is that education system in Africa face significant challenges and that it will take years to overcome the loss accrued over the last 2 years. While the importance of education might seem trivial for most of the audience here, it is worth a few minutes to reflect on just how far-reaching education can really be. In the words of President Mandela, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Beyond the personal gains of education of those who actually receive it, society benefits greatly from an education populace. For instance, if all women in sub-Saharan Africa had a primary school degree or education, there would be 70% reduction in childbirth deaths. So really, education does literally save lives. So how do we harness the power of technology to democratize education, to ensure, excuse me, that the education does reach everyone and not just stay in the confines of those who are well-to-do? In the next few minutes, I will humbly share my thoughts, recognizing the complexity of this topic, and that it will take all of us put our heads together to begin solving this issue. Technology has transformed every aspect of our lives, but it seems that education seems to be the exception. Today, you'll be hard-pressed to find someone in any village here in Africa who doesn't use a telephone on a regular basis, who doesn't pay their bills through mobile money. However, technology is rarely present in most of the education system. It is present in the private sector, in the private schools, and to some limited degrees, it was used during the COVID-19 via radio and television, a one-way communication. But by and large, is really absent. And actually, in some instances, there is an active effort to keep technology out of schools. I'm sure it would not be a surprise to most of the people that some schools today actually prohibit phones in the schools. Now, I do agree that they can be a distraction, but they could also be a tool for learning. So how do we balance that? How do we make sure that we do provide our children with the tools that they need to learn, at the same time minimizing the destruction of the said technology? So really, if you look at the potential of technology, potential of education technology, it is significant when it comes to improving access, quality, and relevance of the learning that takes place both in school and out of school for our children. So how do we make sure, how do we consolidate this effort and make sure we have in place a holistic approach that would ensure that we are benefiting and that our children are benefiting from technology and education? I also submit that we need to look at addressing all facets that actually contribute to the learning and also contribute to addressing some of those barriers that we see every time that we attempt to introduce technology into schools. I would also suggest that we begin with the ICT in education policy at the policy level. Right now, if you look at most countries in Africa, there are those that have policies, and there are those who do not have ICT in education policy. There are those who do not have it. But even those that do have these policies, they're rarely actionable. They're rarely clear. They really address all facets that need addressing. So for instance, we need clear and actionable ICT in education policy with specific milestones and also with funding. We cannot have unfunded mandate. It is a recognition that in most instances, schools need not only the physical buildings, but they also need the technology that is required for the student to learn and be equipped with 21st century skills that they are going to need in this globalized economic world that we live in. So that would need to make sure that we are updating the antiquated procurement systems that render selling technology to government a challenge for most edtech entrepreneurs. And since over 90% of our children are actually educated through the public schools, the government cannot, you cannot go around the government. The government is a major player to ensure that actually this takes place. That's why I would advocate for the government to really take a look at the policies and make sure that those policies and actions are actually creating an enabling environment that would encourage technology usage in education in order to empower and prepare our young people to compete at the global scale. The second thing is that we really need to ensure that our teachers who are already overwhelmed, we already know that we have a deficit when it comes to just the sheer number of teachers. We need over 1 million teachers to be able to educate the students that we have today. And that's just talking about sub-Saharan Africa. And even those we have, the quality is questionable, and we do not provide sufficient professional development that goes to strengthen the ability of teachers. And here, technology can play a crucial role because we want to ensure that the teachers have the ability and the capacity to learn, to continue improve themselves, but at the same time, we want to discourage the absenteeism from teachers, or to keep students without a teacher for a long time when the teachers are actually out learning. So using technology, we can ensure that we have professional development that can be accessed anytime, anywhere. And that allows the teachers to actually be able to use this while they're not at school. And that's why it's so important to equip our teachers with the technology that they need. In a lot of places, you find that teachers are actually required, should they need technology, to buy it themselves. I question that approach because if we look at, for instance, when we hire our policemen, we don't ask them to go buy the guns that they're going to use in doing their job. So why should we ask teachers to actually procure the instruments that they need to deliver the education that we ask them to deliver? So I think that there is some thinking around that on really ensuring that the teachers are provided the tools that they need. Second, we really need to take a look at our curriculum, the curriculum that we use in our schools. Ensure that the curriculum is up to date, that it's actually delivering the skills that are needed. We have a lot of graduates in sub-Saharan Africa that are unemployed because they do not match the skills that the economy is looking for. And so here we need to ensure that the curriculum is actually informed by the needs of the overall industry and economy. And technology can be of great help at these instances. For instance, we all know that students learn differently. As a teacher, when you're standing in front of 50 students or 100 students for that matter, is that it's very difficult to individualize the learning because of just the sheer volume of students you have in front of you. Technology does allow you to actually individualize the learning. And so if we use it, we would be able to actually provide the needed education at a way in which every child can access it.
Hello? Yeah, I seem to be having some kind of...
So in continuing with the point that I was making around empowering our teachers and ensuring that curriculum is brought to date, up to date, and that it's responding to the needs of the 21st century. I would also emphasize the need that to ensure that the technology is not concentrated only in the well-to-do, and this is why we talked about the funding necessary within the concept of policies to ensure that rural areas, for instance, not only do they have access to technology, but that we do have infrastructure that actually delivers the connectivity to those areas. I can, for instance, use an example of where in some areas, particularly in the less sparsely populated areas, there might not be a economic justification for the telcos to expand connectivity to those areas, but through the use of universal service funds, for instance, governments can encourage the expansion into that. And through that expansion, then those students, those who need it the most, can actually have access to the learnings that they so much deserve. So with that, I would also indicate that as we discussed earlier about the ability of using technology to individualize learning, is that at the same time, you can really build in an assessment that is a contribution of learning. So that is where we need to move away from testing to actually assessing for learning purposes. And technology allows for continuous assessment. That means that you build in some adaptive learning. where students can study a chapter. After completing that chapter, they get some testing that actually responds to their answers and allows them to deepen their learning. And that would be a system of assessment that actually contributes to learning, rather than wait until the end of the year to actually launch an assessment that it is more punitive, that actually contributes to the learning. So this is where I think that technology can be used once the enabling environment is established through the policies, and the curriculum is actually developed and updated to provide the learning of the 21st century, that the teachers are provided the ability for them to deliver this, and actually the way for them to continue learning, and that we revolutionize the assessment so that it's really contributing to learning, and that we encourage infrastructure, particularly connectivity, access, and usage throughout the entire ecosystem, rather than focus only on the well-to-do areas. So these are areas that address the system level as well as the demand level. But now we have to take a look at the provider side. The previous panel was discussing the technology. It was a panel of technology providers, and it was addressing the issue of they've encountered or what they've observed over the last 2 years when it came to uptake of education technology during the pandemic. It is true that we saw an uptake of the technology, but we also have to be mindful that a lot of the edtech entrepreneurs come from the technology background and not the education background. So there is a need to make sure that our education provider, the edtech providers, are actually trained in the science of learning, so that they incorporate the principles of science of learning in their product. Doing so would actually demonstrate not only an increased access to learning, but a deepening of the learning itself. And we will see more students learn better. And with that, it will increase the evidence of impact, which will go towards, justifying or at least pressuring, more investment in this space. So it is to the benefit, I think, of the edtech themselves, but also on the students that this actually happens. In addition to that, we need to really start to look at the investment, the financing models within the edtech ecosystem. It is true that we've seen an increased investment in this space, but that increase has been more towards the latter part of the company, the companies that are more established, and it has concentrated in 4 countries. Over 80% of that investment went to 4 countries. That was Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Egypt. And so how do we ensure that the investment not only expands to more countries, but also spans the entire, in the entire gamut of edtech companies, particularly the startup companies where innovation thrives. So that's where we need to look at various innovative finance model or investment model to address these rather critical areas of increased edtech availability. So with that, I think that we would be able to tackle the elements of edtech and be able to create an environment that is going to spark and build the edtech ecosystem on the continent, particularly locally generated edtech ecosystem, and it would improve learning throughout Africa. I'll end with quoting a sentence actually in the announcement of this summit that says that never before has the digital agenda been so necessary and vital in the public sector. This is indeed very true, and nowhere is more evident and more needed than in the education sector. Thank you very much.